The tape. Peppa found a box in the closet. Dusty. Old. On it was written, "Our Home," in childish handwriting. Inside was a tape, a regular VHS, but their family hadn't owned a player in years. Mummy Pig was surprised. Someone must have mixed it up. Let's throw it away? But Daddy Pig said, "I have an old player in the basement. We can watch." That evening, they all gathered in the living room. The screen flickered. The image shook. On the tape, their house, like someone was standing silently, filming. "Strange," said Mummy Pig. "I don't remember anyone recording us." Then, dinner scene. Everyone sitting at the table. Daddy, Mummy, and Peppa on both sides. Two Peppas, identical, both eating. But one of them smiled. Wrong. Suddenly, one of them turned her head and looked directly into the camera. And in the next instant, she was standing in their room. This is an unreleased episode of Peppa Pig that was never aired on TV. The Dark Temptation. It all started as a normal day. Peppa and her family were living their usual life, playing and enjoying themselves. But that day was different. Peppa was playing in her room, and George was building a tower with blocks. Everything seemed calm and peaceful, but this peace was just an illusion. That day, Peppa started to notice something strange. Her parents seemed different, distant. There was something in the air, an unease that couldn't be ignored. Peppa felt like something was slowly changing in their house. It wasn't until she saw her parents sneaking off to the kitchen late at night that she started to realize what was going on. They were eating these strange, shiny, colorful candies. Peppa didn't know what they were, but she could tell something was wrong. These candies weren't like any sweets she had ever seen. They were almost magical, glowing with a strange light. At first, it seemed harmless. But as the days passed, Peppa saw her parents changing. They became irritable, distant, and cold. The candies seemed to take hold of them, transforming them into something unrecognizable. Her dad, once loving and caring, now sat in the kitchen all day, stuffing his face with the glowing candies, his eyes growing dull. And her mom was no longer the warm, comforting figure Peppa remembered. She was always on edge, angry and withdrawn. One night, when Peppa woke up from a strange dream, she saw something that sent a chill down her spine. In the kitchen, her parents were no longer themselves, their faces twisted into monstrous shapes, their eyes black as night. Their bodies seemed to grow and warp, as if the candy had turned them into something else, something terrifying. Peppa tried to scream, but no sound came out. She couldn't understand what had happened. The thing that had taken her parents, these strange candies, was not just a simple addiction. It was like a dark force that consumed everything in its path, turning her family into creatures of rage and hunger. The next morning, Peppa found the kitchen empty. Her parents were gone. The candies, now all over the floor, seemed to mock her, their glow pulsating like an ominous heartbeat. Days passed, and Peppa grew more and more desperate. The village was in turmoil, and strange rumors began to spread. People said the candy had started showing up in local shops, mysteriously appearing on shelves where they'd never been before. Children were buying them, and their parents didn't know what was happening. The townsfolk grew ill, and some even disappeared. Peppa's heart sank when she saw a news report on the television. The reporter spoke of a strange new candy that had appeared in the village. People who ate them began to act erratically, and many of them died or disappeared. The reporter spoke of the dangers of these magical, cursed candies, but it was too late. The damage was done. The report concluded with a chilling message. The candy's origins remain unknown. The deleted episode of Peppa Pig. The porcelain doll. Peppa finds an old, dusty toy box in the attic. Inside is a large doll with a porcelain face, but it doesn't have a face, just a smooth white oval. "What a strange doll," says Peppa, looking at her. George looks at the doll with apprehension and hides behind his mother. At night, it seems to Peppa that the doll is looking at her. She hears quiet whispers from her room, even though no one is there. The next morning, the doll is in a different place. Peppa tries to get rid of the doll, but it always comes back. One day, while playing with George, Peppa draws the doll's face with a marker pen. At first, it's funny, but at night, the face on the doll changes. Now it's an evil grimace with sharp teeth and glowing red eyes. Peppa is terrified. She realizes that the doll is alive and something bad is happening. She runs to Mama Piggy, but she doesn't believe her. At night, Peppa wakes up from the cold. She sees a doll by her bed. The doll stretches its porcelain hand towards her. Peppa screams, but no one comes. In the morning, Peppa disappears. George is playing alone in the garden, but he is no longer grunting with joy. He holds a faceless doll in his hands. Piggy's mom and dad are standing at the window, their faces full of despair. Their voices are barely audible. "Where is our Peppa?" In the evening, Peppa went home, but the road veered off to the side. She saw familiar faces, Susie, Rebecca, Denny, and new ones, pale and motionless. In the center of the circle, a puddle of black liquid reflecting the sky, but distorted. They stood silently, waiting. Peppa slowly approached. Susie turned her head abruptly without blinking, her eyes empty sockets, a black drop at the corner of her mouth. All the children simultaneously turned their heads toward Peppa, synchronously, faces devoid of emotion. The puddle in the center of the circle pulsed, gentle ripples emanating from it. Peppa stepped back. The children reached their hands out at the same time, their fingers elongated, black liquid flowing from them. The children's mouths opened to an unnatural width, but silently. The puddle in the center suddenly stretched upward, forming a black tentacle reaching toward Peppa. Peppa ran. When she looked back, everything had disappeared. But it was worse. Numerous trails of black slime led in different directions. Some led to Peppa's gate. Someone left with her, or followed her. Midnight, Peppa sat on her bed, drawing a circle in her notebook. A shadow near the door began to change. It was the silhouette of one of the children from the circle. Beyond the door, the park. That very park. Children in a circle. She was among them, standing hand in hand with the others. If Peppa isn't with them, then who is in the circle? Her eyes became as empty as Susie's. She slowly smiled. Suddenly, a face, blurred, eye sockets empty, mouth twisted into a grin, black liquid dripping, darkness flooding everything. You are already standing in the circle. You just don't know it yet. It all started as usual. Peppa and George were playing with Evie, Peppa's younger sister.
"Evie, George, let's build the tallest tower,"
suggested Peppa. Suddenly, Evie started complaining about stomach pain.
"Don't worry, I'll help,"
replied Mommy. Peppa and George looked at their sister with concern. Daddy Pig went to the kitchen for medicine. As he was about to return, suddenly the lights in the room went out.
"Strange,"
said Daddy Pig. Suddenly, a huge black hand appeared from the darkness and grabbed him. When Daddy Pig didn't come back, Mommy Pig called Dr. Rabbit. She began examining her, but suddenly black, thin tentacles appeared from Evie's mouth.
"Help!"
screamed Dr. Rabbit as Evie grabbed her and dragged her out of the nursery. Peppa and George watched in horror, unable to do anything. Meanwhile, Mommy Pig went down to the hall and stumbled upon a cocoon made of tentacles, in which Daddy Pig was barely visible. Suddenly, everything went dark again, and a second cocoon appeared nearby, this time with Mommy Pig inside. Now only Peppa and George remained in the nursery. No one could help them. They heard Evie's whisper approaching the door.
Evie?
Asked a frightened Peppa, looking toward the door. She appeared with a grim smile and completely black eyes, saying,
Now you are my toys.
Peppa Pig deleted episode, The Mold Frog. This episode was never aired. It begins like any normal day. Peppa and George are in the kitchen. George, did you throw away the old meat? George shrugs. They open the fridge, and the smell hits them like a wall. Something moved. A frog. Dark. Wet. Still. That night, the mold started growing. First, under the fridge, then on the floor, then on George. George was sitting still, his skin turning gray. There was mold on his hand, and it was moving. By morning, George was gone. In his place, a strange, soft figure. It looked like George, but it was breathing through gills, and mushrooms were growing from his shoulders. Mummy Pig didn't react. She looked at Peppa with wide, glassy eyes. Breakfast is ready, dear. Peppa locked herself in her room, but the mold was already there, on her bed, on her toys, and on her arm. There was a small mushroom sprouting from her cheek. She touched it, and it twitched. Everything behind her, a forest of moving, breathing fungi. And in the center, the frog, sitting, smiling, waiting.